I'm going to talk about digital campaigning, so specifically email to target, something that I'm guessing most of you in this room do some element of as part of your job. And this is it's something that, call me romantic, call me a little bit crazy, but I kind of feel there's something really pure and nice about email when it comes to emailing your representative. I think there's not every country in the world can you have the email of your political representative and send them a message directly from you to them. And there's something really kind of simple and, like I say, pure about that. And again, might be a bit romantic, but you don't even need to buy a stamp. So it's a really wonderful way in which we can really keep this democracy alive. But the problem is this whole system is on the verge of collapse. And it's been really nice to see the creative examples from Dom and Joe. And I particularly really liked what they were saying about keeping it positive, as well as the creativity, but also listening to the feedback from the parliamentarians as well, like super important. But I've really kind of been going on a bit of a mission. I've been interviewing MPs and MPs' offices and campaigners to find out what's going on with this disconnect and why this kind of email to target and email recipients are not always landing very well. And I wanted to bring my findings to as many people as possible in the Engaging Networks audiences, like the perfect audience. So thank you for listening, and I hope you find it interesting. And but it's also part one of a journey, and I'm not quite sure where we'll be going next. So again, I'd really like your thoughts on where we take this. So yes, it's 24th, so the 4th of July. 2024, and I'm guessing anyone like you and me who've been worked in policy or public affairs or mobilization or something like that were on the edge of our seats and saw this incredible landslide, and it was a really exciting moment, obviously. And having always worked in on the edges of kind of political comms, I woke up on the 5th of July, and my first connections on LinkedIn looked something like this. And there's no bragging in this because there's nothing glamorous about parliamentarians. But it turned out that people I'd been on hen-dos with, people I'd worked with, people that had been freelance with, and in fact, a member of my own household were now suddenly MPs. So I got to see really up close and personal what was actually happening on the other side of this digital campaigning. So I really got to, sure there may be people here that have worked in MPs' offices, but when it's literally happening in your house, it feels a little bit up close and personal. So I really wanted to dive in and see what is actually going on here. What's this kind of disconnect that's been happening? Because when you're seeing something on the inside, I think we make assumptions about, yes, we know MPs get a lot of email. Yes, we know a lot of those are being handled by their staff, who are all, lots of them are really brilliant people. But it really feels different when you're on the receiving end of it. It really felt like I was really feeling what that experience was like. You got to see very up close and personal. So that's where this mission started. So just a tiny bit of extra context is I work now for the Developer Society. So I was at Engaging Networks for 9.5 years. I found out, by the way, you get a sabbatical now if you've been there for 10 years. And that was policy was brought in just after I left. I won't forget that one. But anyway, it's really, really wonderful to be back. But working at the Developer Society, we are a not-for-profit digital agency. We're also a cooperative. And what that means is that we have our own mission. Because we're a not-for-profit, we have our own mission. So yes, we build websites, we do consulting, we consult with organizations like CAS, the Center for Acceleration of Social Technology. Try saying that in a hurry. Because we're really interested for our own mission to advance technology for the sector. We want organizations who are doing good in the world to get access to the best tech. That's our skin in the game, so to speak. And we won Co-op of the Year last year at the Social Economy Awards. And it's really interesting when you move to an agency, because what you see is a bigger picture. We really are interested in the humans in technology, because you can have the best tool in the world that is user tested to the nth degree, and it works beautifully, and it's really engaging and wonderful to use, and it does everything that you would hope it would do. But if it doesn't work with how humans operate in their processes and in their workflows, it's utterly useless. And so that's where I wanted to apply that same thinking to the question of digital campaigns and what was happening in this disconnect with digital campaigning and email to target. So yes, I wanted to come back, take a step back and say what's going on here. The way we use it, because this is going to sound a little bit extreme, but I think some of the unsophisticated use of email to target is damaging democracy. And I know that sounds a little bit extreme, but I've got a case, so bear with me. So I came up with the first lot of interviews have come up with two main threads, and they're unsurprisingly about the humans. It's all about the humans. When you pull back and you look at the bigger picture, look at the ecosystem in which the technology operates, it's all about the humans. And I'm going to break that down in a little bit, because we've had better tools than this for 20 years, haven't we? But nobody is surprised that this kind of thing pops up time and time again. Tens and tens of these in a week will come up in an MP's inbox. And the technology has been there to do it much better than that. I mean, 20 years ago, we've been able to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. And it's really, it is quite frustrating. Why is this still happening? Why is it still bad when we have the cutting edge tech in the room right here today that you're using? This kind of pure communication can become a bit spammy, and that's not because there's not some fantastic people doing some great work, but the reality is, if you look at an MP's inbox, there is a lot of really unengaging, off-putting stuff in there. So yes, this is the other side of the campaign, and so me just feeling like something is going wrong, and I say I've got these two things that I've kind of identified. One of them I'm calling the invisible layer. Sounds a bit mysterious. And the other is something that I've stolen from educational psychology, which I'm calling the zone of political influence, and we'll get onto those shortly. But by sending the amount of volume that we are sending, and I should preface all of this with I'm absolutely on the campaigner's side. I think that email to target is a fantastic vehicle that I want to keep alive, but we have created a situation where plenty of MPs' offices just ignore it. They just ignore email to target. And it's been really interesting to see the new intake as well. And if you haven't read Hope and Collaboration, the SMK report, I do recommend giving that a read to see how things have changed with the new intake, of getting some nods in the room, how it's changed, and maybe not as positively as we'd have hoped with the new intake of particularly the Labour MPs. MPs' offices have nicknames for people that email them quite frequently. Sometimes it's the name of a person. We've got a Judy. Frequent flyers. It's these derogatory terms that are used for people that are contacting them quite a lot. And it's really unhelpful, I know, but it's the reality. That's what it's looking like on the other side of the fence. And volume isn't always necessarily a litmus test either. Now, you've got to bear in mind that MPs' offices are run like businesses of their own. Each office can do things really as they want. So if they decide that they're going to blanket not respond to stuff, that's just a policy that they've made. They don't necessarily have to do it differently. They may be a right to respond, a right to reply, or however, that's a good thing, but they're not necessarily obligated to do that. And once those practices are set, they're set. So yes, and volume isn't necessarily the litmus test that we think it is. Volume is used a lot, isn't it, as an indicator? We got this many emails, we got this many responses. But really interestingly, when you talk to MPs and their offices, they'd all interpret volume really differently. It could be, this has been a really successful campaign. A lot of people care about it. Or this is just a successful campaigning organization. And that, therefore, I'm not going to pay attention to it. So it's just something to bear in mind that it's not all about volume. And I know that you've got bigger impact statistics that you're looking at, but it's just something, it's very easy to get kind of concerned about what the numbers are. So it's really interesting, again, to see those responses on the RSPB, the 5 times more responses. Those are the kind of things, obviously, that are much more important and much more interesting. Now, I have had hundreds, if not thousands, in fact, definitely thousands of conversations with people about campaigning technology. I have been asked, how do you segment? What's your email deliverability like? Are you able to segment by PPGs? Will this integrate with my CRM? Literally thousands of conversations. And I had this penny drop moment when I was talking to an MP's office. And something clicked. And I realized that nobody had ever asked me, what happens on the other end? How does this fit into their workflow? What happens when the MP's office get this email? And it utterly blew my mind. We spend so much time as we should, thinking about supporter engagement and conversion and how we can make this something really enticing and beautiful on the front end that people are going to be really delighted about, and they're going to send through something that looks fabulous and is so well crafted. But are you actually at any point saying, how's this going to sit in their inbox? Because it's being received by an overworked, underpaid, really bright researcher or office manager or caseworker, and they are using what is basically looks like 1998 technology. A lot of the tools that they use, some of the case management software that they'll be using to get these emails in, they only just got the ability to broadcast email, to bulk email in December last year. So you're sending hundreds of emails, and somebody is responding one at a time, and there's a human cost, obviously, but there's also a taxpayer cost to that. And I did some fact packet maths by talking to a lot of offices and saying, can you quantify how much time you're spending on responding to specifically kind of little more blanket emails and mass campaign emails? And I won't even say it because it's a Daily Mail headline. That's the problem. And it's really something, it's another angle that you think is worth paying attention to. So, these overworked, really bright, great people, I'm sure you work with MPs' offices, and there's some wonderful people working in there. They receive somewhere between 100 and 300 emails a day, and one or between up to 10, 12 of those emails might be something they can act on right at that moment. I had someone saying that right now we're getting a heart sent from Tanzania. These are the kinds of things that they need to act on at that moment. And it's not that the will isn't there to act on the bigger issue. It absolutely is, but it's not necessarily something they can do. And I'm going to talk about influence in a minute. But again, it was just thinking about out of their workflow, how are we thinking about how they can engage with this? How is this working on a day-to-day level with somebody who actually has to process those emails? Because I can tell you that I would be surprised I'm saying this is a conservative number, but 90% of emails that you send are not being read by MPs. And that's fine. They're being read by the really important people who are doing the job for the MPs, but they are not being read by the MPs. And those responses, of course, as you know, are not necessarily being written by the MPs. But I rarely spoke to an office who could categorically say that there was particular campaign emails that they had definitely shown to their MP. They're just not getting through. So, are we asking the question, what do you need? How does this work with what you need to operate and do your job well? And there's a really good example of this. I spoke to a campaigner in a relatively well-resourced household name charity running brilliant campaigns. And they talked about something that, in fact, Dom and Joe were doing, which you have a very specific reason for holding back those, to not get the mermaid pictures through, for holding back those emails. And they did the same thing. They were sending hundreds of emails to a particular target, but they were holding them back, and they were going to send them all in one go. And she said, yeah, because we thought that would be easier for them. We thought it would be easier for them. I said, did you ask? Did you actually ask the office? Is that how they'd prefer, rather than drip feeding those emails? They didn't have like a legitimate mermaid catching reason to do it. They just decided that that was the best way of doing it. And no, they hadn't. They hadn't asked. It's just an assumption of how they think an MP's office would like to engage with it, but never actually asked. And I thought that was really, really telling. So yes, MP's offices aren't the obstacle, they're the answer, but we need to work with them. We need to ask them what they want, workshop with them. How do you like to receive information? What's most useful to you? What can I send you that's really of use? And work with that. So yes, this is a desire path. The concept of desire paths, it's lovely, isn't it? We've built the road, but there could be an easier way that somebody wants to walk. How can we help them on that? How can we help get the message across in a way that's going to work with the processes and the systems that they already have in place? Because you won't be surprised to know that the parliamentary systems are pretty archaic, but if we can find an easy way through, we should absolutely be doing it. An MP said to me, he said, my power comes down to two things: headed paper and the ability to shout at people. And I think, to be honest, the headed paper is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this scenario. I think that in reality, that is 9 times out of 10 the most that that a parliamentarian can do, and that's very damning. I know they make the laws ultimately, but the vast majority of cases, what they can really do is just kind of push something forward by the virtue of what their job title is. And so what an MP can actually impact on is hilariously limited. Which is why, when I'm showing you photographs of the screenshot of my LinkedIn connections, all being MPs, there's nothing glamorous about that. That's a really unsexy job that they have, but they really do. This is one of the most powerful things in their arsenal. Look, I totally do agree that there is a real virtue and a benefit in people being able to show the groundswell of opinion and how parliamentarians can stand up and be a voice for things. But they're not necessarily going to be able to take action on very much at all. If you're a rural backbench MP with an interest in rural policing and SEN provision, there's virtually nothing they can do to get aid into a war zone. And this is really important. The inability for MPs to actually act on anything, if we're not matching them and giving them the space or giving them the opportunity to do things that they can do, or more the other way around, asking them to do things that are wildly out of their influence, it becomes really alienating. And this is where I start to see this harsh but potentially fair feeling that this is a breakdown in democracy happening, because what you're creating is more of a disconnect between what we're asking people to do and what they're actually able to do. And I feel like I'm talking like I really, that we should be sympathetic to parliamentarians. I don't. I just want campaigns to be as effective as they can be. And seeing it from the other side and seeing sometimes the animosity for some of the campaigns that come through, because they are asking, and I think it was one quote that was, it was ridiculously big. The kind of asks that they are sent sometimes are ridiculously big that they can't take action on. So it's not a nature of will, it's just nature of reality. So I'm being asked to do something that is like that is their party's policy, and asking them to vote or vote against it. I mean, they're not going to do that. So here's another situation where you have quite a lot of campaign emails that are being sent with, quite spicy language, quite upfront about, passionate is probably a nice way of putting it, quite passionate language. But you should take a stand on this. And they're saying, but that's my policy. Of course, if you look at what I've done, this is what we think is the most important thing for my party, and yet you are saying you should take a stand on this. And it's really frustrating. At the best case scenario, it just looks like you haven't done your homework. But at the worst case scenario, you're kind of, what it feels like to the Parliament's office, the parliamentarian's office, is you're spreading misinformation about what this MP cares about. And so then they've got to go do the job. Again, feels like they're doing your homework. And this is, again, I appreciate resources is a massively easy thing to say, oh, if you could just go and do this. So the MP's office will then go and say, no, look, here are all the things I've done in this particular issue, which they may or may not read. They send that back to the constituent and they may or may not read that, but the damage has been done. There's an assumption that they are not taking a stand on something they care about, that they don't care about an issue that's super important, regardless of how much work they have done on this issue or not. And again, the technology to do better segmentation has been around for 20 years. It's not that we can't do this better. So that's where I feel that there is this disconnect, and where it affects democracy is particularly when we're living in this really alienating world anyway, where it's very fighty and it's very, there's so much, and it's just difficult conversations going on, an assumption of anger. And then you are asking, you're setting both ends up to fail, because you are asking a constituent to ask their MP to do something that's wildly out of their ability to do. And I get it. We can't assume that the constituent knows what is and isn't in their power, in their powers that be, what's actually within their realm of possibility. But they're setting them up to feel like they can change that. And of course they can't. So there's going to be a disappointment at their end and a frustration. And our MPs are doing nothing for us, or they don't care about this issue. And then on the other side, you have this, well, there's literally nothing I can do about this. So I can show you what I've done, but it's not actually going to move the dial. So it feels like we just get this more and more frustrations at each end, and I feel it's really unhelpful sometimes. Because trust is already low, so how can we give people things that they can do, that they can actually take action on? And I've kind of created something. I'm not a psychologist, but there's something called the zone of proximal development, which is from educational psychology, which is where you look at what a student can do by themselves and what they could do with help. And I think we can kind of loosely, don't look at it too closely, just squint at it. We can loosely apply this to the political influence. What's the sweet spot between what an MP can do assisted and what's in their kind of remit or what's wildly out of their zone of influence? I think we're structurally asking for some of the wrong things, because if this sometimes a headed paper is not going to solve it. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but look at the behavioural model, and I think this is why I think political campaigning is still super helpful and super useful. And there's a real power use of it, because to get motivation, to get something to happen, you have to have these things, right? Ability, motivation, and prompt. Well, motivation and prompt is your bread and butter, right? You can do the prompting, you can do the motivation, you can get the information out there, but have they got the ability to do it? That's something you've really got to. You build bridges by making sure that they are, again, within that what we call the political zone of influence. Another thing that comes up quite a lot with my interviews with MPs is around timing. You see a lot of the time MPs being asked to do things at simply the wrong time of year, or campaigns that are still running when the event is passed and things like that. Please retire your campaigns if the event has passed or the motion has happened or whatever it is that the consultation phase has been over, because it's another of the things which are really unhelpful. And again, you can take educational psychology and behavioral science as a test here. We need to get the timing right to make sure that the action can actually happen. So let's again do our homework a bit and make sure that we are asking people at the right time, because again, it just came up time and time again with MPs and their offices. So yes, to be sending the right message at the right time is super important. These were just some senior MPs actually sent some messages, and these were a couple of quotes that I thought was like they're framing the problem and the solution in the same place. It's like they do want this to work as well. This is a system that's great. I think that, the ability to contact your email on an issue and provide them with really relevant data that they can use and they can show off and they can stand in Parliament and get their soundbite and put it on social media, it helps everybody. But you've got to make sure that you're working within a system that can be influenced, that they can be influential on. So I kind of thought these were a couple of kind of interesting quotes that I'd share with you. It's not just about customization as well. So I think that's the one for the conversation in the bar afterwards, but I'd really love to have a chat as well about customization and where and when people are finding that is effective, because from an MP's office perspective, it's actually very frustrating. So one for every glass of wine, I think. So we're on this kind of cliff edge, and it sounds a bit dramatic, but we have. Does anyone read the House magazine? But in the House magazine, there was like a commercial ad about the AI tools that MPs' offices are trialing at the moment to respond to emails, right? Okay, so then you've got, quite rightly, AI being used to create campaigns, and so the noise just speeds up, and the noise gets noisier and noisier, and you have the machines talking to the machines, and ad infinitum, we just got computers talking to each other, and the influence is taken out of the picture entirely, right? So it's such an interesting time. I think we're also seeing parliamentary services, parliamentary IT, trialing different ways of kind of holding back emails, or how those emails are getting across to the MPs at all, if at all, or how those messages are getting across. So I think if we don't do something now, if we don't look, how can we work within the systems that they have? How can we make sure that this is timed well and it's something that an MP can influence? How can we make sure that the language that we are sharing recognizes the effort that has already been put in, so that we're not creating a system which is already creating more divisions in a system that, in a world that is already unbelievably divided? How can we make this system work for us better? We really need to, it's not a drill, we need to act now. And this is, we need to improve how we communicate and how we're talking about it, and how we're thinking about it, and what we're asking for and when we're asking for it. Because this is really, let's keep zooming out, I guess. That's what I'm saying. Keep zooming out. And I just would have to put up a picture of where I live, which is West Bay. If you watch Broadchurch, yes, that's where I live. And it was that same cliff edge, like this is the whole picture. And this is where, again, where are the humans in the mix here? Where are we checking that we're looking at how humans actually operate with what we're asking them to do, and rectifying or changing accordingly? Because they are just people at the end of the day. They're very unglamorous people doing an unglamorous job. And particularly the people in their offices are working incredibly hard to respond and to engage. But you have to say, how can we make it work better for them? Otherwise, it's just creating real alienation. And that's where I feel the whole system is breaking down. And I've also been thinking about things like Wardley mapping. I don't know if anyone's worked in the public sector, but I think, again, we need to zoom out and say, where can the innovation happen here? Where should we be evolving? There's so much that we do because we've always done. And digital campaigning, email campaigning, it's, again, I'm romantic about it. I think it's great. I think there's something pure about it. I want it to keep happening. I want you to be able to continue to rally people to create change and get those messages across to the parliamentarians about the issues that they really care about. Because I do believe in it, but we are at this time now where we've created a system that is just really not working for anybody. I'm carrying on this work. I'm going to keep talking to MPs' offices. I've got a lot more to talk. Apparently there's 650 of them, nobody told me, and their offices. So I'm going to keep talking, I'm going to keep asking the questions, but I'd really like to hear from everybody. Do get in touch about what you think we should be doing next and how we can, lost my last slide. Here it is. That's me, get in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kira. Some really great questions, and the first two are questions and comments from former parliamentary staff members. Thanking you for talking about this.
Oh, no. Oh,
dear. So the first is, as soon as campaign emails were identified, we would wait for a standard reply from the party researchers and then copy and paste them out. The members don't waste time with them. Nothing beats a personal connection between constituents and their elected members. That's what we should focus on.
Yeah, I think that actually varies party to party and office to office. You do get some that will take a blanket response. And this is really harsh, but I got absolutely lambasted yesterday by a chief of staff, because what they hate most, I'm so sorry to say this, but what they hate most is emails that are mostly the same and partly customized. That is their worst nightmare. And yet that is what I've spent my whole career saying, this is a really great thing that you should do, get the personal messages in, because of all the right things that MPs are saying, just like Joe and Dom said, the MPs are saying, we really want these personalized emails, I want the personal stories. But when you have this mostly carbon copy and a bit of personal story, I thought he was going to throw a chair at me. Yes, is there a question in there?
Well, just why is it frustrating?
Yes, because it really it takes about 3.5 days a week to get through the emails. Now, most MPs' offices aren't that big. They might be 5 people at most. So 3.5 days is not insignificant when you're trying to get a heart back from Tanzania and make sure somebody isn't homeless. And again, everyone's offices do it differently. So you do have some that are making use of AI quite cleverly. They're using things like Notion. They're pulling up all of the MPs' data, the MPs' like responses to their written questions and things like that, and being able to pull that into an email so that they're sending back a good response. because they do want to send a good response. If they've spoken on a particular issue, they want to have that conversation or they want to make sure that they are said, no, I am taking action on this issue and this is what I'm taking, rather than just taking the party line, particularly when someone has gone onto the effort of customizing the text. So it makes it, again, you will see, obviously, I've definitely spoke to plenty of officers who will just delete all of those emails. So it isn't the same for everybody. But yeah, they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, I think, between not wanting to respond completely to blanket, but feeling like they have to, and right to reply and all of those things. But yes, ultimately, it is 3.5 days worth of time per office.
Thank you. So, ultimately we want our messages to get through. So what do you suggest in how we can create political engagement without annoying our MPs? Is it timing? Is it related to party?
Come on, don't think that you don't know that the most important thing of an MP is making them look good, right? Give them something they can do that relates to their constituency that makes them look good. Now, that doesn't really help for your internationals in the room, I'm afraid, those who work in international development. Make it something they can actually take action on. But also, I've just got a bit of a bugbear about written questions and writing to the minister because I feel it's ultimately very performative. A lot of what happens in the chamber is utterly performative. Events are usually quite good. That's a high bar because they're quite expensive. But something that has got data in it that makes them look good, that they can go to an event and it's got a local issue or a local bit of information or something they can do there, is so much more likely to get engagement and a response and a reaction. And again, I know that doesn't necessarily help every issue, but those are the ones where you can much more likelihood of them showing any interest. We can guarantee on self-interest as a motivating factor.
And then another person who worked for an MP said that their member loved getting ETTs, meaning that they would get their email address and then use that at voting time. And just curious on your reaction to that. And are you seeing other people viewing constituent engagement as positive?
Yeah, so a really good example of that is the schools, the Phones in Schools campaign. And I've heard, by the way, everyone in this room, I've heard about your campaigns from the other side. So, ask me anything. But a really interesting example was the schools campaign. And some groups did some really cool stuff where they absolutely used that as an opportunity to take that information, because a lot of people engaged with that were people that had never contacted their MP before. So this was a fresh list of people to sign up. And it wasn't the same old, you're already on our list type people. So when they're doing it well, absolutely get the information. But I should say, and I don't think this is something that Engaging Networks is guilty of, but some of the technology makes it really hard for them to actually find the email of the constituent, or that the constituent is not easy to tie up with their caseworking platforms. So whilst in theory, great, we've got a whole load of people, let's build a list, let's communicate with them about the issues they're interested in. Again, that worked really well for some people on the schools campaign. New people all wanted to sign up to a list, find out more about what they're interested in. But really, the technology has to be slicker than it is for that to work very well.
Thank you.
Rant over. Thank you so much.